Welcome to Sit and Stay, the podcast that breaks down the challenges of starting and maintaining a mental health practice into digestible chapters. Sit and Stay is presented by RipsyTech, an electronic health record company committed to addressing the mental health crisis in the United States.
Welcome back to the Sit and Stay podcast, brought to you by RipsyTech. I am one of your hosts, RipsyTech product manager Parker Anderson. As always, I'm joined by RipsyTech founder and CEO, the resourceful and ever so brilliant Tom Tarshis. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Parker. Two adjectives today. Thank you.
Two adjectives, yes. I try to change things up. So today we are joined by a very special guest, and that is Virginie Goldstein of Tech Connect Reset. Hi, Virginie.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, and we're really excited to have Virginie, and Virginie's a dear friend that I've known for 17 years, and we met right as we were both sort of starting practices, finishing training, and Virginie's an outstanding marriage and family therapist who is from the beautiful, best city in the world, Paris, France. I think most people would agree with that. And then Virginie moved to the United States and had to repeat a little bit of her training in order to get her license active in the state of California, but sailed through that no problems. Virginie's trilingual, speaking French, Spanish, and English. And most importantly, had the pleasure working with Virginie for several years at the nonprofit I started. And really her skill as a clinician, therapist, just like, it's similar style to myself, like keeping it real with families, working with kids, being good at calling out parents on what they need to do without getting them angry, which is a important skill. And then Virginie, recently really found a niche with helping kids and teens and families with screen addiction. And she started her own entity called Tech Connect Reset. And we're thrilled to have you, Virginie, and hear about your journey as a mental health clinician.
Thank you. Thank you for greeting me today. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to do this podcast. And share, share any information, whatever is, can be helpful for people to listen to it, whether they are like clinicians or, non-professional. And I would probably focus more on the non-professional aspect, to help people to get more resources and access mental health support and services in the easiest way.
Very good.
In a better way, at least.
And Virginie, we always start our guest episodes by asking our clinicians, like, when did you know you wanted to be a mental health clinician? What was your journey to becoming a mental health clinician? Did you know when you were 5 years old, or what was your story?
You got it, almost 5, when I was 5 years old.
Wow.
It started around. I probably think it always started in our childhood anyway. And I had the influence from back in Paris. So of course I was living with my parents, but I would spend a lot of time with my uncle and my aunt, the aunt in Paris. They didn't have any children, so I was pretty lucky to spend time with them. My uncle was amazing, and he always tried to educate me. He was very curious about, hey, you should do this, learn this. It's like, he was into astrology, knew the planets and everything. Would wake me up at 4 a.m. and look at Jupiter or whatever, like at 4 a.m. in Paris. And then when I was 12, as much as I remember, I don't know if this was that age, but when I was 12, he said, okay, now you need to read these 2 books. So one book was called something like Basic of Psychology, and the other book was called Basic of Psychoanalysis. And I guess I read them, and I'm not sure if I was able to understand everything at that time, but it probably got into my brain a little bit. And then my uncle was passionate about behaviors. And I think the passion for working in mental health, is really coming from him. And then the passion for behaviors. And I never get bored about my work because every time it's a different story. Every time it's a different behaviors, even though we have diagnoses and we work on evidence-based approach, And also what brought me to this field of mental health is also, again, my uncle, when he was 40 years old, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And for me, it was very hard to see him declining. And I was like, I got to do something about it. And of course, I was very powerless. And so this, over the time, this is what brought me to behavioral psychology, and also behavioral psychology and neuroscience, because I really wanted to understand, the brain, how brain works, and how the brain impacting, the body and mind, right? So I think that way, trying to understand how the brain works, that could help me to understand psychology better.
Yeah, and I think it's true in Europe. Like, you actually have a lot more neuroscience training that you did in France than I think is common among people who train in the US to become marriage and family therapists. Is that correct?
Yes, and I mean the background is in France is if we do psychology, it's really focused on psychoanalysis and understanding, what's wrong with the mother. And I think what am I going to do to help people with problems, And so this is why I lean toward more neuroscience and behavioral psychology. But I do use my background in psychoanalysis to really understand people and accept their behavior better. What is the meaning of their behavior? Okay, this person is narcissistic, but what is, there is it's from childhood, there is something that to really try to understand, I'm not trying to judge the person, and trying to understand the person better by using this background now.
Very good. And the other thing we talk about is, you definitely treat everything, but would you say you have a specialty? Would you talk about the screen addiction and working with those families? Would you call that something that you've specialized in or very interested, or how did that passion come about?
That passion came started a few years ago when I was working with you. When we were running those programs with kids who were, having more and more mental health problems, and we end up at the hospital because parents would take the video games away. And I feel oh, there is something to do about it. And of course, the technology is becoming, it's very dominant in our life today. And it's, people don't have, I think they still don't have the tools, to manage that and to create a balance, and help their children to monitor, manage their time. And it can become very extreme. And so I felt we need to do something about it, because I think there is nothing in place about that. And I mean, we can work on cognitive behavioral therapy, and there is no diagnosis about screen addiction. The current diagnosis is gaming internet disorder. And for me, anything around screen, screen usage, the problem using the screen, when the behavior becomes maladaptive, there should be a diagnosis about it. And there is not a diagnosis. We look at, we treat the problem in a dual diagnosis. So the parents bring the kids to us. My kid has screen addiction. He doesn't sleep, or he spends so much time on the screen. He doesn't do his homework and doesn't socialize. And they are over focused on the screen and spend so many hours on the screen. So we look at the behavior with the screen. What is the relationship, between the child and the screen? And then we also working on what is the underlying problem of the, that is under the screen behavior. And a lot of time, it's the kids have so of course we send a bunch of questionnaires related to depression, anxiety, ADHD. I mean, if there is trauma, it's a little more tricky to see that. But we do treat both, and then we really help family realizing, your kid, has ADHD, and he has deficiency in dopamine, and then is using the screen as a way to release dopamine, and then it's becoming, this, snowball, effect of like that never ends. And it really helps family to understand. Like yesterday, I had a mom who came to see me, and she wanted me to help her with her daughter, who already has a therapist. And this kid has been, struggling with mental health for many years after the parents divorced. Like she did self-harming, and she had to do a DBT program, and she's still struggling with her behavior. So she spent a lot of time on the screen. And I was telling the moms that as she was telling me her daughter's story, I understood that it seems like this kid is like using the screen to regulate herself because she has issue regulating her own emotions. And a lot of time it's, especially in the Bay Area, it's pretty common. Mm-hmm. So, and then she was like, I understand. And so the next step working with families is like really working on communication first. And I tell them, if you cannot change a child behavior if the communication is broken. So we need to work on communication first. As you you try to validate your child, you try to work on effective listening, open the communication, your child will come to you and then will be more open to make changes.
Yeah, very, very, very true. And I think there's a lot of people in the profession that, are just working with the teens or the kids and are not having any conversation with the parents. And I think the success of your work has been a lot of the engaging with the parents and, the psychoeducation and then helping with those practices. And, Parker spends a lot of time on screens, Virginie. How should we help him?
We can have a conversation, a good communication to start with.
I think I've developed some of my own healthier behaviors around my own screen time, but it was interesting listening to you talk because I think my fascination with the screen time addiction piece definitely came from working in Tom's clinics as well, working in that population and seeing how the relationship with technology has really evolved. And even somebody in my generation who grew up with social media in its infancy, the people working with people who are then younger than me, where it's been around their whole lives and seeing how that plays out over the course of, their development was fascinating. So I'm curious how your, psychoanalytical background has kind of, I think you've touched on this a bit, but how has it kind of like specifically helped you, manage those cases of like screen time addiction?
I use that with the parents. Oh. I mean, the kid is still young, and I can understand, the child has developed their own coping mechanism when they're, family are like fighting and divorcing or like they lose a parent, So, so I'm not so worried about that with the child. I focus more on the parents about like trying to understand their own personality, using a lot of mentalization based therapy as well. Like what is the meaning? I mean, it's always about what's the meaning of the behavior. And I also try to teach the parents, like this parent yesterday, and mom is really nice and say that what is the meaning of the of the behavior when your child said, I don't want to go to school today. And then you see her spending so much time on the screen and she comes to you and she comes with a problem. And so it creates anxiety to you as a parent. Try to not take it personally. Of course, you have good meaning. You want to help your child and you have good values. If you take it personally, so then the communication is over. And so, and she was cool because she was like, oh yeah, I get that. So I say, if you tell your child, so I was giving this example with mentalization, right? Two teenagers, Cynthia and Kelly, and Cynthia sent a text to Kelly, and Kelly doesn't respond for 24 hours. So what is Cynthia going to think? The first thing she's going to take it personally and say, my friend doesn't like me, right? But if the kid think further and say, oh, what if the parents took the phone away? Oh, yes, I feel less, I take it less personally. So, and I explained that to the mom, and I said, if your daughter comes to you and she says she doesn't want to school, and see her spending so much time on screen, it's like, what's the meaning of that? You want to understand what's the feeling about that? What is the underlying feeling, right? And she goes like, oh yeah, I understand better. And I said, and everybody have, everyone has some trauma to some level. And when I work with the parents answering your question about the psychoanalytic background, it's really, if people are like very hurt in their life or didn't have enough love or didn't have, become narcissistic or just, have low self-esteem, because of their childhood. So I really try to, you visit some parents, they will become defensive because they feel hurt that they feel they cannot be a good parent. So it's always trying to reassuring the parents and accepting the parents for who they are, and be non-judgmental with them. And I think this is where the psychoanalysis helped me, because with cognitive behavioral therapy, there is none of that. It's like, oh, you have a problem, you need to do this. But like with the parents, it's you show like, okay, so I understand, sometimes you cannot tell the parents what you understand as a clinician. You say, oh, I see your problem. But we really coming, in a non-judgmental way and trying to understand, this is what happens. You're doing the best you can. So like if you're aware, I think if the parents are aware of the behavior, of the problem, and they're ready to change it, I think the door is open for changes, and have them like to make a change, and make a difference at some point.
Yeah, and I think Virginie talked about, we have Virginie, you mentioned like kids winding up in the hospital over screens, and this is when there's been sort of the usual story is the kid's been using more and more screens, and way past the time there should have been a conversation about it. A parent takes away a video game or phone or computer, and then the kid starts smashing stuff in the house, or cuts their arm or says they'll kill themselves, and then the police show up, and then the kid's in the hospital. And on some level you can feel like, man, that's ridiculous that a kid is being in the emergency room or hospitalized over a video game or a phone, but that happens so often. And I think that's where, having that specialty or willingness to work with a population to help stop that from happening is a very noble and needed treatment in mental health. And Virginie, you're very savvy at business, and I feel like you've always had a little interest in business, but can we do a lot. This podcast is meant to help people thinking about starting a business, or who are interested but maybe scared. But can you tell us, a little bit about your business background and what it's been like starting Tech Connect Reset?
It started a long time ago. Yeah, I mean, I finished my hours as an intern to get my license. Like I did hours in a private practice. I mean, I work with organization, but like I started doing hours in a private practice. So I got a good training with my supervisor, Barbara Rose, and she was amazing. And I really like the quality of work in private practice. I felt we could be more present for, the patients, and patients are actually, and whether sometimes they had like some, what they call victim weakness, benefits. So then the families are more involved, and, so the way I started it is like, as soon as I got licensed, I opened my practice. And I could say, I realized it was not that hard to open the practice because I already had, something in place. So having the patients, but the only issue was like during the training, I had all of this chat on papers, and I'm like, I'm not going to do that again. And then, as clinicians, when, there is the lab, when you need to keep the files for like so many years after the patient is done, and especially 10 years after 18 years old. So I started using, I started using like an electronic system, which was easier. So then I could write my notes, and I could also help families to like build the claims for them, whether they were in network or not in network. So that was the good thing. And I wonder if you, Tom, told me about Officer I like this.
Yeah, Virginie's talking about this. Mentioning a competitor. No, it's okay. But Office Ally was great in 2007. They haven't necessarily updated their system too much since then. So, but it was, I think the unique thing that Virginie said was she did, and I don't know, maybe you told me, like, I actually don't remember, but there was this system that you could use. And then, but the unique thing that Virginie did that she mentioned is she accepted this victim's witness insurance in California that would pay for kids with trauma, but then regardless, she would submit the insurance claims for her patients, whether they were in network or not. And it's like, most clinicians in private practice don't do that. They give a super bill. And I always encourage that, if you can just it's a lot easier for you as a clinician to fill out the fields and submit the claim for your patients, even if you're not in network. And I think that really is a good business strategy, because it makes people feel better about going to see you, even if you don't take their insurance, to like submit their claims for them. But you said people who are, you use the term, it was actually pretty easy, but people who are scared about running their own business, or will they make enough money? Like, how were those concerns for you, or you kind of didn't worry about that?
It was a concern. I mean, when I started the practice, as soon as I got licensed, I had enough caseload, and I could continue to work in the practice and develop the practice, but I didn't want to be. So the downside of that is, like, I didn't want to work in a practice on my own. So that's probably why I joined your clinic, because I didn't want to be isolated. That's the downside of like building a practice. But if people are ready for that, they should go for it. But definitely, if I had to redo it again, so I would definitely like get a good EMR, like electronic medical record for sure, and finding a better way, like to track, patients' progress, the progress, with their, treatment plan and their diagnosis. So like, I would do that, I would redo it in a better way today, and including those questionnaires, or like you have in RipsyTech, where it's so nice to have those questionnaires and like to have them like automatically rated, scored, and because I would waste so much time, and I wanted to be so much evidence-based, so I would give the questionnaires to families, and I would correct everything by hand, score everything. It was sometimes I would not be able to do it because it was such, time consuming. So if I had to redo that, so redo a practice again from the beginning, I would definitely focus on making sure I have a good electronic system, at least to write my notes and have good documentation, because the law, and especially for MFTs, like the law is really strict in California. Yeah. So it's not about audits or anything, but the law with our own board of behavioral sciences is very strict with us.
Yeah, and Virginie was a little unique that, and a lot of clinicians still haven't fully adopted evidence-based practices, but yeah, right, you were giving questionnaires and scoring them by hand and going over that with patients long before it was even cool, or long before there was really pushed and recommended to be doing that, which is a nice feature. And tell us a little bit about what it's been like having employees that work for you, renting office space, how have you handled those situations?
Okay. Yeah. One more thing I want to say about when you start the practice is definitely, how you keep record of your notes, like finding a good system and then tracking, the progress, and also having a good billing and accounting system too. Mm-hmm. And so back in 2020, when I started hiring the first staff, I used like a, accounting system like online. And so I make sure everything is in one place, because I used to keep everything by hand. It was very complicated to do the taxes at the end of the year. So I know sometimes it's more expensive for people to buy QuickBooks or like something like that, but it's so easy, and it really makes their life easy as a business owner. And so you can focus more on clinical stuff. And hiring staff I think I started hiring interns. So I was a supervisor. I'm still a supervisor. So I started hiring interns, and it started that way. I was a little scared to hire a licensed therapist at the beginning. So I started with interns. At some point I had like 5 interns, and then I started having a licensed therapist. It was part-time. And the craziest thing is like it started during COVID. Mm-hmm. I got my first employee on March 2020.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
and it went really well. And and then because everything was on Zoom, online, I also hired staff in South California, in San Diego. And then I hired licensed people from there, and then I was trying to provide a good, I should say, good standard of care for the patients. So in that way, I wanted to make sure for the patients to have a good standard of care, I have to treat employees well. And there is a really good book called First Break the Rules from Cunningham, I think. I can't say the last name. First Break the Rules is a really good book about management. And what the book says, like, you need to take care of your employees before you take care of your customers or our patients. If your employee is happy, your patients will be happy. Now, my priority is to make sure that the employees are happy. And because you know what, I have good employees, they are happy to work with us. And then I sleep well.
Very good. And how come you mentioned you were afraid to hire other fully licensed clinicians? Why was that?
I don't know, because I never had experience, I work in clinics where, after BACA, where I hired staff, and because I've been also programmed, and it's not the same when it's your own, your own practice. Because a lot of time those licensed therapists, of course they wanted a W-2, but I realized when I hired interns for the Board of Behavioral Sciences, they needed to be on W-2 anyway. And then I was kind of scared, like, to hire licensed therapists. So I started hiring them on 1099 for 3 months, and as they, increase the caseload, and then, I feel like there is, a good relationship between me and the employees, so then I can transition them to W-2. And if they do well and they are happy, then over the time I can provide them benefits.
That's such a smart way to do it, right? So start them as 1099 contractors and build the caseload, and then if it's looking like a good relationship, then to bring them to W-2 is a really good business strategy. And Parker, I think in this field, for any of these sort of training fields, that as you go through, there's always sort of supervising more junior people, and a lot of clinicians get very comfortable in that clinical supervisor role. But then there is that difference to, like, boss employee versus clinical supervisor or supervisee. And so I understand what Virginie means, that you can be hiring an intern to work for you. You're comfortable with this relationship because you've done this sort of clinical supervision. Hiring someone equally licensed, that now you're the boss and they're your worker, can feel more scary.
Right. And that's a good point, exactly, because I hired them as an intern, and I have an employee that she's been working with me for 4 years. So I hired her as she was an intern. They say associates now. And then when she became licensed, so we renegotiated the contract, and it was an all different contract, and it's way more serious. So I have a lawyer who was, kind of like check if everything is correct, because I don't want to be in trouble. That's very important to me, to make sure everything is legal. And the other thing I wanted to say, so yes, you're right. So, like, you're a supervisor, you're also the boss, but you're mostly a supervisor. And then when they become licensed, like, you become the boss. And I think it's a different relationship. And then the other issue I had was, like, when the employee, when the licensed therapist is an employee and is an employee full-time, so now I have full-time employees. Full-time employees for MFT is like 30 hours a week. So it's basically 24, 25, 26 patients per week plus 6 hours of admin time. Because I don't want the therapist to be burned out, And if they want to do more hours, they have the flexibility to do more hours, and which is the case with the employees I have right now. And then I realized that as you're the boss, and then you have to set up rules, and then I'm sure Tommy went through that in the past, like, you're the boss, and then you're not doing the HR, like, who is taking, like, vacation and stuff, and, like, PTO. And I learned, like, I made a mistake myself in the contract. Because it's also something I didn't know, maybe because of my English second language, where I separated sick days and vacation time. And now I'm changing that, and they're like one umbrella PTO.
Yeah, no, and well, Virginia, we learned the most in business from our mistakes, and there are still companies that do separate sick and vacation days. It's usually more like government or really big entities, but from the business side, we know the data says employees will always 100% take their sick days every year. And the better business strategy is definitely to combine sick and vacation days into a PTO umbrella as the employer, because otherwise it's human nature, like whether you're sick or not, the sick days are going to get taken. And so even if it's like the same amount, like even if you're going to give 1 week of sick days and 3 weeks of vacation, it's better to just give 4 weeks of PTO. Is a better company policy to avoid people calling in sick the day of because they have sick days they need to use. But how do you think your employees will react to your changing the policy?
We'll see. I just hired a new employee, so I think she'll be fine with the new policy. And it's and I checked with my lawyer, and I was like, can I change the policies from the contract? And of course of course you can change it. And I was scared to make the change, so like he reassured me, and we're putting a new policy in place. And I have a backup with my bookkeeper, and of course she's French. She's amazing. She lives in the East Coast right now in Princeton, and she's amazing. She's also part of the national team of the field hockey.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Yes. She's older than me, but like right now she's in New Zealand for the month to like play. Wow. So she's my bookkeeper, and like working with her, like she's the one who is tracking the hours and PTO, because we have the timesheet for like each employee. I verify the timesheet, and then she does the payroll. And she's helping me, because as a business owner, you cannot do everything. You need to delegate. That's very important. Even though sometimes you have to spend more money and you don't have the money, you have to do. So now she's a filter between me and the employees, about payroll for sure, but about like PTOs and stuff like that, because I don't want to have a staff meeting and deal with that. Like it's my job is right now to work as a clinician. I love my work, and we continue to do that, and also working on the business development as well.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about that on other podcasts, right? Part like knowing when to. Yeah, when I started my first business, I'm like, oh, I'll just do all the accounting myself, and then I made big mistakes, and then you don't have the time, and like, yeah, now we have an amazing accountant that works for both our clinic and also for RipsyTech, and it's well worth the money, even though, as you say, like, it is another expense, but it is definitely worth it.
Right. And one more thing about the location. So the office, when I was also scared to take this lease over, and back in 2021, so I took over the lease, and because I would sublease all the time. So now I'm like, I have to take things more seriously. So I took this lease over, and I'm very happy about it. It's a fantastic place where I work. Like the property management, they just replanted everything. It's like so well maintained, and I changed. So this office was like one office, one waiting room, and one office. And I remodeled everything, and I reduced the waiting room. So I have a small waiting room and 3 offices that I use with my staff, and I also like sublease to other clinicians.
Very smart. Yeah. And your clinic does both virtual visits and in-person, correct?
Yes.
Okay. It sounds like you talked about the dynamic of kind of being like a clinical supervisor, but then kind of becoming somebody's boss. And it sounds like, just from listening to both of you talk about, business and running a business, that like having that experience of managing all of those business development items, that, you kind of it, like, would you say that you kind of feel like you have just come into that role like confidently with just, dealing with these things that maybe they're not thinking about in the background, but, somebody's got to be thinking about it. And now, like, does that role as a boss feel like clearer now as time has gone on?
Yeah, I think this year it became a little more clear. It's a good question. Like, I didn't realize that before. And it's yeah, you're right. Like, it's a good point. Like, I didn't realize that I had to shift my role. Yes.
Very good. Virginie, what we like to ask people, like, what's something that's frustrating or that you would like to change in the mental health field? Like, what could we do better?
What could we do better? So I think what could we do better? It's really focusing on normalizing the behaviors related to like depression, anxiety, or just the well-being, and self-care. And we really need to normalize that. And so this is what I was going to say about the next question, but like, I want people to realize sorry.
Okay.
I want people to realize that mental health is part of our health. It's together. I always tell people our brain is connected to our body. It's not disconnected, and they don't realize that. And I keep telling people that, anything we experience in life, we like hear and see and say, it's always changing our neuronal connections, right? And which always impact our way of thinking and feeling and behaving, right? And I don't know how we can help people to like change that, and be more aware of that. It's probably focusing on the awareness, Yeah, I would like people to be more informed and be more aware of like how to take care of their own mental health, how to take care of themselves, which includes like health and mental health. It's everything together.
Do you think that's gotten a little better since the pandemic in the last couple of years? I agree there's a long way to go, but do you think we're making progress?
I do think we are making progress. I'm not so sure after COVID, but I think probably like the past 20 years, there is a lot of progress.
That's true.
In any kind of cultures, I live in the Bay Area. Parker, you don't live in the Bay Area anymore. But
not anymore, but grew up there.
Tom is kind of in the Bay Area. I mean, but we are the population we are working with. They have different cultural background, and it's very interesting to see them actually be more open to therapy today, be more open to get help and like just receive support. And in any kind of like cultural background, because I work with like Indian families, Pakistani families, Persian families, Israeli families, French, from everywhere. And it's really interesting to see people coming to us. And I also work with some Mexican families, and like it's so nice. And people, it's totally normal. They're really open to the, getting help.
Yeah, so for a long time, people who like were immigrants or first generation in the U.S. You wouldn't even think about mental health treatment, but you're seeing a lot of like change happening among, and the Bay Area is full of diverse populations. So being able to work with people from lots of different cultures is very cool. Is there something you're excited about in the field of mental health right now?
Yes, always. Yeah, I'm excited about, I think the changes also happens because, of the technology. And I feel like, when people, for me, it all makes sense, like, to reach for help. And I think, now people have more access to the internet, and like the internet, there is like podcasts, just like we've been doing today, like YouTube videos or like, online reading. So if people have questions, now there is the AI. And, I attended a workshop last summer on AI, and mental health. It was very interesting. And I think it's really cool because when people, need help, they have a problem, they go online and they look for help. They try to see what is going on with my, I have like my body is shaking, it's panic attack, what is going on, and what do I do about it? So I think it brings awareness. And I'm excited about that because I think it gives more tools for the people to get help, and also for the clinicians, because for us clinicians, I think there is more and more. I mean, we don't have blood tests to like test depression, but we have more evidence-based, more tools, more research, and so and people are more aware of that, which is great. And I think for the patients, they can, access, mental health services from everywhere with the internet. And it's amazing, like from a small town, they can have, online services. And so I think this is what I'm excited about. And I think there is a lot of things to do around that, and really connecting the world together. I mean, just in the US, connecting the US together.
No, I agree. And it reminded me, I want to show you, we're talking with multiple AI companies, and we have one that is doing parent training, which you've done a lot of, and it's a very interesting product, and we're working out maybe integrating it into the RipsyTech platform. But right now, we're also looking for people who do a lot of parent training work and I want to show you what the AI can do with the parent training model and get your impression. And I'm excited about some of those artificial intelligence possibilities as well. I think we're starting to put together some research projects because a lot of stuff is just happening without the research. But logically, some of the things I've seen look very exciting, and we'll connect about. I want to show you this other parent training.
Okay, great. I'm looking forward to it. Yes, there is more to it. It's like it's interesting because how many times, I don't know if this is your case, but how many times I've been contacted by high-tech, small companies say, "Hey, I can build an app for you." I would be super excited about it, but I would need to spend so much time on that. And money, and right now I don't have the time, and money. But there is so much opportunities about that, and a lot of projects around that.
Do you have advice you'd give to a young mental health professional who's graduating that was scared about starting their own practice or group? What would you tell someone?
I mean, I would say, don't be scared, right? Everything will be okay. I mean, it's a vague statement. I would say I mean, I'm not saying starting small, but like I said, focus on three things. Like a way to keep your notes, which would be probably like an electronic system today, and more connected with the evidence-based system. Because I would say system because they would have more they would have more they would have more credibility with their patients if they show more evidence-based methods. So that's one thing, and definitely working on getting a good system for billing and accounting, right? And I would also recommend just also see people in person. There's a lot of young, graduate students who just got licensed. They do online, and I'm like, okay, I don't get that. The first time I did an online session goes back in 2017. I'm like, oh, what's going on? I was like, is that possible? Yes, it's possible, and it's great. But it's not just that. We need to be able to see, depending on the cases, we need to be able to see people in person. We have a way more information about what is going on.
That's really, I think, sound advice. And there are a group of graduating clinicians that have maybe never seen a patient in person. And there are, I don't know the statistics, but there is a very large percentage of clinicians who only do telehealth visits. And, the data is still a little questionable. It seems okay for adults, but if you're working with kids and families, it's much more, and I'm curious what you think, Virginie, but I'm much more comfortable doing a video session, if it's with a family that I've seen in person lots of times, or if I've seen them in my office, then like doing the video visit feels better to me. Do you feel more comfortable seeing someone on video that you've also seen in person?
So yeah, especially and also with adults, like, it happens like right now I had an adult, like I saw him online and now he's coming in person. It's like the reverse situation. Working with kids, I don't mind to do the intake, like meeting with the parents first, like online, it's okay. But then I tell them, like, I want to see when I see the kids, like I want to see the child in person. And if we have to like be hybrid online and in person, but at least I see the kid in person.
Very good.
And I can almost require to see both parents in person at some point.
Very good.
Or like, when they come to therapy, you alternate. You ask, 1 week the dad brings the kid, the other week the mom brings the kid, the parents, the caretakers, whoever they are, so yeah. So it's interesting because people have a tendency to use the internet, like doing online therapy or getting the therapy services online, and actually sometimes it requires more time in person.
Yeah,
it would be more efficient.
Very true.
Depending on the problem, of course, right?
Well, great. Parker, do you have any
Yeah,
for Virginie?
A question just popped into my head about you mentioned when you started your practice that you'd kind of already had a patient caseload that you could kind of take with you. But I guess, nowadays, like, where do you find patients are finding you? Or, do you have to do any kind of, marketing or putting yourself out there? Or do you have like a good referral system? How is that experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've been in the Bay Area for several years, and I love doing community outreach. So I do zero advertising for now. I have people calling from like pediatricians. So I would recommend, like, if people don't want to do advertising, my main recommendation is to be visible. You need to make yourself visible. So which means, you can go to like, I'm connected with a lot of places. They have like the treatment center. So I'm connected to the community outreach of the treatment centers, for like kids who go to like residential treatment or PHP, IOP, but mostly like the treatment center, like in all California, because when they have residential treatment center in the North California, they also have it in South California. So it's really be connected to those people. And be connected with, when you work with kids, be connected with pediatricians. Also do presentations. It's also a good way to be visible. Like you can do presentations for schools, or you choose. I usually pick one topic, and every summer I have a student who like works with me and gather data about, what's the update about screen addiction, what is the most recent screen factors, the most recent risk factors of screen addiction. So, and then I have all of this data together, and I put my slides together, and I do presentation, and like people really for professionals or families. It's like, reaching people, and say, hey, I have a clinic, I'm here, I can help, and probably try to think about being less focused on money as well. And I'm not sure if but for me, it's like I have referrals for like many people from everywhere, like because of all of the years being, I'm not saying be visible, but like for the work I have been doing, through this.
You've given a lot of
time. It's it's today, and it's really, I think it pays off to be able to like have created programs with you, and people appreciate, the work and like those kind of support, and say, you're here, like really like reliable, and then your background. And so I think it takes time to build, this support, to build like the community outreach, referrals. But it's worth it.
Yeah, no, and Virginie, I think, has done a lot of presentations to schools, is active in different societies. And I think one of the luxuries of it being a number of years is if you've been visible, then you don't need to do as much marketing because people know you. And
Yeah.
Virginie, well, we're so appreciative of your time, and thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
We're gonna we'll put information on the book you recommended, and
Yes, I can send you the. I can send you the yes, like first it has 2 books, but the first one to read is like First Break the Rules. It is a very small book to read, and it's really straightforward what to do to have a success. I think being a successful manager when you start hiring people. So it's really
is Tech Connect Reset hiring right now? If people were interested in
yes, I'm looking for another clinician. Yes.
Oh.
Okay.
I will probably I'd like to hire 2 more clinicians and probably licensed clinician. And you asked me about supervision. I'd be happy to supervise, but I think now I also feel like having licensed therapists, it makes the business like more stable too.
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
And yeah, so yeah.
And your
Very
business can be found at techconnectreset.com.
Yes, and it's actually called Tech Connect Reset Family Counseling because it had to be attached to my license.
Oh,
Excellent.
yeah, awesome.
Thank you so much for your time, and it was a really fun.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go ahead and close this out. So thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the Sit and Stay podcast, brought to you by RipsyTech. Virginie, it's been a pleasure having you. For any audience members listening right now, if you would like to submit any questions to our audience Q&A, or you're interested in being a guest on the show yourself, send us an email at sitandstay@ripsytech.com, and you never know what might happen. All right, Tom, Virginie, it's been great, and I'll see you both later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Sit and Stay podcast. Until we meet again, we invite you to sit and stay with the ideas and stories shared today. Dive deeper into how RipsyTech can support your practice by visiting us at RipsyTech.com.